Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Laurie Hammer, and today we're going to deviate from the health topics again because, as you know, I deal with stress and anxiety, and I really think it's important that we know what's going on in the world so that we can reduce that stress and anxiety if you happen to be stressed and anxious about those things. And so I like to know first from firsthand sources what's really going on in our political system and in our world around us. So today I have a Louisiana criminal defense attorney, Ed Tarpley, who is filing some amicus briefs with the Supreme Court, and he's going to give us a really good understanding of what those are and what is going on there and what our voter rights are and how this is affecting the country as a whole. So Ed, I'm really, really excited to have you on today, and I hope this conversation helps to reduce stress and anxiety for all of my listeners.
Well, that's a tall order.
I know.
Particularly for everything that's going on right now. I mean, we probably are all suffering from election fatigue right now.
I am. I'm sure you are. You're all over the country.
Right. I think all of us are approaching the point of wanting this all to just be over with. But
Yeah.
but sadly, unfortunately, when it's over with, it won't really be over with. Okay,
Right.
so none of the issues that we're dealing with right now are going to go away. I mean, all of these issues will transcend the election. I mean, election integrity is probably the most important issue right now because
Right.
obviously we're dealing with the election. And
Right.
so the question is,
Hilarious.
are we going to have a fair and honest and transparent election or not? There's so many issues involved. So let's just start out and we'll tackle some of those and talk about
Okay.
those too. How about that?
That's awesome. I would love to know what's the biggest challenge that we're currently facing to ensure that we have a fair election.
Well, I think first of all is to make sure the voter rolls are accurate.
Right.
Uh, I think that is a really, really big issue right now, and it's an issue in all 50 states. So let's talk about that just a little bit. I just got through filing an amicus brief in the U.S. Supreme Court this week in the Virginia case involving Governor Glenn Youngkin's decision to remove 1,800 or 1,600 illegal aliens from the voter rolls. In other words, people who were not citizens of the United States who self-declared that fact when they applied for a driver's license in the state of Virginia. Now,
Okay.
some states allow illegal aliens to obtain driver's licenses, and most states do not. But
Right.
apparently, in Virginia, you can do that. So what happened was these people indicated they were not citizens, and therefore Governor Youngkin directed that they be removed from the voter rolls. Well, what happened was the several immigrant friendly groups filed lawsuits against the state, and the
Mhm.
Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice, filed a lawsuit um, asking that this decision by Governor Youngkin be stayed. In other words, be temporarily halted. And
Mhm.
a federal judge in Virginia granted their petition. Well, what happened, and that happened late last week, on Friday, in fact. Then on Monday, the state of Virginia went to the U.S. Supreme Court, filed an emergency petition asking for the Supreme Court to intervene and to essentially lift the stay so that the 1,600 illegal aliens could be removed from the voter rolls. And our group, the former Feds Group Freedom Foundation, which is a group out of New Jersey, it's a 501c3 nonprofit.
Mhm.
They're involved in the health freedom movement. I'm sure you're familiar with the former Feds Group Freedom Foundation, all the
Right.
work they've been doing with the remdesivir widows, the people who lost loved ones as a result of the hospital protocols, plus the vaccine mandates and all the other health freedom related issues that are out there. Anyway, the former Feds Group Freedom Foundation uh, uh, filed a amicus brief, and I filed that brief on their behalf on Tuesday. And well, actually, yes, Tuesday. I think Tuesday afternoon is when we filed, and the Supreme Court handed down a 6-3 ruling Wednesday morning, like just within hours of
Mhm.
our filing the amicus brief, uh, supporting Governor Youngkin, uh,
Okay.
overturning the stay, and directing that the 1,600 illegal aliens be removed from the voter rolls in Virginia. So that was a tremendous victory for voter integrity in Virginia. And it should send a message loud and clear throughout the entire nation that illegal aliens are not entitled to vote. If you are a non-citizen, if you are not a citizen of this country, in other words, you can't vote if you're a member of the diplomatic corps. You can't vote if you have a green card. You can't vote if you're here on a student visa. You can't vote if you're here on a tourist visa. If you're not a citizen, you cannot vote. I mean, that's
why is this even I don't understand why this is even an issue.
Why is it even an issue? Yes. That's the very question I have asked. Why are we having to go to court to fight over issues like this? It doesn't make any sense. No sense at all. But that's where we are in this country, that we have people that are advocating for illegal aliens to vote. Illegal aliens are not citizens. They don't enjoy the rights of citizenship. And one of the greatest rights we have is the right to vote.
Right. And I mean, I have friends that have gone through the path of citizenship correctly and legally. And, they didn't even question the ability to vote. They're like, I'm not a citizen yet, so I don't get to vote. And so it blows my mind. I don't even understand why this even has to be a conversation. So,
well, let me just say what you have is a progressivist, a liberal advocacy group in our country that existed for a long, long time, that simply want to obliterate what it means to be a citizen. Okay, these are the same people that are in favor of open borders. In other words, we should have a border. Anybody that wants to come here can come here, and then they can do everything that citizens do without actually being a citizen. Well, and I know that is not what America is all about.
No, definitely not.
Important citizenship and the right to be a citizen in our country is something that we treasure and that we value. And you know what? It's not easy to become a citizen. It should be to become a citizen. But those of us who are citizens need to stand up and fight vigorously to protect citizenship in our country.
Right. I don't think people really understand what is going on, the magnitude of it, and the infiltration. Because I'm like, what do you mean people can register to vote or even get a license? I mean, I have to show my license for like everything. And so how do you get a license as a non-citizen? I don't understand.
Well, the way this happens a lot of times is through the motor voter law. In other words, in 1993, Congress passed a law which set up this national voter registration process nationwide, where people could register to vote at the Department of Motor Vehicles. That when a person got a driver's license, if they weren't registered, then they could register in that process. And so this has really enabled hundreds of thousands of people to get registered, probably without being properly vetted. People either did not tell the truth, or the DMV personnel in whatever state they were registering in didn't follow the law and process their application correctly. And so a lot of people have slipped through, and people have become registered. And I'm convinced that there are illegal aliens in every state. In other words, people who are here illegally that are registered to vote. So the bottom line about what happened in Virginia is that Governor Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, made a statement which should be heard loud and clear throughout the whole country. That they have a law in Virginia which enables them to remove people from the voter rolls who are not qualified to be a voter. And one of those reasons is if you are not a citizen. And so he was following Virginia law, he was following the Virginia Constitution, and he was following the federal Constitution. So in any event,
that's not even a partisan issue, that's a constitutional issue.
Absolutely. So this is something we should all agree on, whether we are Republicans or Democrats or independents. We should all agree that the voter rolls should be accurate. In other words, if you've moved out of state, you shouldn't be on the roll in the state that you left.
Correct.
And if someone has died, they shouldn't be on the voter rolls either. So people that have moved are no longer living in the state or people who have passed away, those people should be removed from the voter rolls. And guess what? Illegal aliens should be removed from the voter rolls too. So,
Yeah.
when we first started talking, what are the issues? Well, the first issue is to make sure the voting rolls are accurate. And so we see this battle taking place in state after state. And Laurie, what I'm here to tell you today is that this issue will continue to be litigated after the election is over. This is not going away. The whole issue of accurate and precise voter rolls is one that we're going to have to deal with in our country.
Right, right. Well, and I mean, I'm 51. And so I remember, I mean, clearly, the last election, there was, a question on the integrity of that. But even, the 2016 election, there was question of integrity, previous elections, with Al Gore and, all these kind of things. I remember just going like, why can't, this has been an issue forever, and it's not a partisan issue. It's a US issue. There seems to be. So why is this so hard to, what I want to say, monitor or to get a hold of? Why is the election integrity such an issue for such a long time?
Well, let me just say this, that under the Constitution, the process of holding and monitoring elections is left up to each state. In other words, the Constitution specifically states that elections are a state responsibility. And so because of that, we have 50 different state election systems in the country. Well, 51 if you count the District of Columbia. So what does that mean? That means that the laws are different in state to state about how elections are organized, how they're processed, how they're run, how election officials, establish the hours of voting, whether early voting or not, how absentee voting is handled. All of that varies from state to state. So the law we have in Louisiana, for instance, prohibits votes from being counted after election day. Well, the law in Pennsylvania allows votes to be counted after election day. So you see, that's a big issue right there. Can votes be counted after election day? And so that's just one of the issues. So we have all these different election systems that vary from state to state, and that's why we have a lot of confusion around the country. Well, I'm a strong believer in federalism. And what is federalism? Federalism recognizes that we have 50 states, that every state is separate and distinct, a sovereign state. And you might pass laws in Iowa that we don't have in Louisiana, or vice versa.
Right.
Well,
right.
that's great. That's what is great about America, that our states are different. And so we don't want to lose control of our state elections. We don't want the federal government coming in here and controlling our elections.
Sure.
Absolutely. But here's the point. Here's a point to be made, and this is what I've said numerous times in the last couple of months. I think that we need some minimum constitutional standards so that all the votes that are cast nationwide are equally representative of the people that are casting them. In other words, that every vote counts for the person that cast that vote. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that if, let's say in California, which has a large illegal alien population, a large amount of non-citizens in the state of California. And California is our most populous state. So let's say that they have tens of thousands of non-citizens on the voting rolls. Well, then if those people are voting there, well, then that dilutes the vote that you're casting in Iowa, or the vote that I'm casting in Louisiana. Because guess what? We're lawfully registered in our state. We are citizens. And so that is a dilution of our vote. That impacts our vote. And so what does that mean? It simply means that the votes that someone casts in another state has an impact on the votes that you cast in your state. And
Right.
what we need to have is we need to have some minimum standards nationwide. Well, what should those standards be? Well, number one, the road rolls should be cleaned up, and we should have only citizens voting.
Right.
That's number one. That should be a no-brainer. Number two, I think there should be some minimum photo ID required in every state. I
Well,
mean,
you have to show your ID for everything.
We do. We have to show our ID for everything. Why shouldn't we have to show our ID to vote?
vote.
Well,
Yeah.
here in Louisiana, it is a requirement that you
In
show.
Iowa as well. Yeah.
Okay, so we have about 20, I think 25 or 26 states require photo ID. Then we have about 10 or 11 states that require ID, but it doesn't have to be voter ID. And then, believe it or not, we have about 15 states that they don't require any ID. Well, California is one of those states where there's no ID required, photo ID, paper ID, any other kind of ID. Well, to add insult to injury, the California legislature just a few months ago passed a law that makes it a crime to ask somebody about their
I heard about that. Like, I don't understand.
Isn't that absurd? That's absolutely absurd. I mean, it's crazy.
This is the same state that you had to show your COVID vaccine card to like get into the grocery store. I'm like, I don't understand.
Well, guess what? In California now, it's a crime to ask somebody about their ID. Not only do they not have any requirement that you show it, the voting commissioners, the election commissioners, they can't even ask you about your ID. So how can we be assured that people voting in California are qualified to vote?
Are citizens of the United States? Yeah.
See, that's the sort of thing that just is crazy, and we've got to change that. I mean, so I think sooner or later a case will get to the Supreme Court, and they will probably rule based on an equal protection standard that as a matter of equal protection of the law, that everyone nationwide, number one, should be a citizen to vote in our elections, and number two, they should be required to show photo ID to be able to cast a vote. I think that's
reasonable.
That will come. Well, let's talk about one other thing real quick. And look, there's so many election law issues. We could spend the whole program talking about this, but one more really big one that you'll be interested in, and that is, should states be able to count votes after election day? After election day. Well, some states allow that. In Louisiana, we do not allow that. In Louisiana, if you cast an absentee ballot, or if you're overseas in the military and you send your ballot in, whatever you're sending in through the mail, it has to arrive in Louisiana before election day, prior to election day. If it arrives here prior to election day, then it can be counted on election day. But if it arrives here on Monday, too bad. Your vote count. Well, guess what that means? That means that you have to take responsibility for your vote. If you want to vote and you want your vote to count, guess what? You get your absentee ballot early, you fill it out, you seal it up, and you put it in the mail to make sure it gets back to the registrar of voters in time for it to be counted properly on election day. Well, there was a case that was decided last Friday in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is domiciled in New Orleans. The Fifth Circuit is comprised of 3 states, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So there are 3 states in that circuit. And so there was a law in Mississippi that was passed during the COVID pandemic that allowed ballots to be counted up to 5 days after the election. And so the Republican National Committee and the Libertarian Party of Mississippi both filed suit challenging that law. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on Friday, this last Friday, that the law was unconstitutional, that under federal law and under the Constitution, the federal Constitution, that all the votes should be counted by election day and not beyond election day. So that's a really big ruling, and it only affects those 3 states. And of course, Mississippi had a law that allowed ballots to be counted 5 days after election day, but Louisiana didn't have that, and neither did Texas. In both of those states, votes have to be counted on election day, and that's it. So, but look, this is a big case because it's a federal circuit case, and we think eventually that case will probably go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And if it does, I'm hopeful that the U.S. Supreme Court will agree with the Fifth Circuit and require all votes to be counted by election day.
Right. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I don't understand why that's even an issue either. That just makes logical sense. Like
That just makes
if we vote in, our state elections, it's done that day. There's no 5 days later. If we vote in our local elections, it's done that day. Usually by 8 o'clock, the polls are closed. And then, within a couple hours, who won. So that seems reasonable.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So let's talk about another issue. Okay. The issue about whether we should have paper ballots or not, or vote by machines. So how do y'all vote in Iowa? Do y'all
We have a paper ballot.
You use paper ballots. Well, how does that work, Laura? Tell me how that works.
We fill it out and then we put it into the machine and it counts the vote and we move on.
Okay, so you get a paper ballot, you vote it, and they put it in the thing. So you don't go into a machine and punch a computer screen
Never
or
have. Nope,
anything
we don't
like
have that in Iowa.
Okay, that's great. Wow. So in Louisiana, we have voting machines. And so you actually go in the machine, you close the curtain, the screen comes up, you press the screen, and the light comes on indicating which candidate you voted for. Then you press a button at the bottom, and it tallies, it counts your vote, I guess, at that point, and then the next person goes in, and that process repeats itself. So they say in Louisiana that none of our machines are connected to the internet. Okay, so that we don't have to worry about any spoliation of ballots or any hacking.
Yeah, that's why ours aren't. Yeah.
Anything like that's what they say. Okay, so I'm taking them at their word, but in some states the machines are connected to the internet. In some states, the way the votes are tabulated is connected to the internet, and they're subject to hacking. And we know that this is a problem. Experts have testified about the vulnerabilities of the voting machines that we have in our country in different states. Again, this varies from state to state, but we know that is a real problem. And so how are we going to solve this problem? And a lot of people believe that we should go to paper ballots, and we should vote by paper ballot, same day voting on election day, and the vote should be counted that day. So I really think that eventually we will go to a paper ballot system. I think that's coming. I mean, I don't know if it'll come. It was obviously it's not here this year. Every state's going to vote, how they're
voting right now. Yeah.
But I eventually think that we will move to a paper ballot system nationwide. Let's think about what they do in other countries. I think in Europe, I don't think any European country votes by machine. I think they all use paper ballots. In France, I think it's like 35 or 40 million people vote by paper ballots. The votes are counted that night, and everybody knows the winner by midnight.
And that's the way it used to be.
That's right. That's amazing. So, I mean, look, if they can do that in France, I mean, surely we can
do that.
do
it here. Yeah. And I think that's why we don't have any issues in Iowa. Like there's never, maybe there, stuff that I don't know, but I've never heard of any upheaval about counting the votes here. It just seems like, well, this is what it is, and this is we're done. And
that's the way it should be, Laura. And so that's an issue that will continue to be debated and argued about in the years to come. So anyway, look, those are just a few of the issues involving the election system. Oh, one more that's very important, and that is observers being able to observe the counting of the ballots.
Yeah, we have that in Iowa. That was always been in place.
That's right. We have poll watchers. We have poll watchers in Louisiana. The Republicans can have a poll watcher. The Democrats can have a poll watcher. Right. And we've always had that. And so that, again, that should be a no-brainer also, that we have that. Now, you remember in 2020, one of the things I think that was so shameful about what happened in some states, not every state, but in a few states, when the votes were being counted after the election, they wouldn't let people come in there. They wouldn't let people get close to, where the machines were counting ballots. In some places that I remember, they put up cardboard to keep people from looking in the room. Yeah. Well, that's just wrong. Okay, that's just
wrong. It makes you think that there was something illegal going on, even if there wasn't. It makes you think that because you're trying to hide something that doesn't need to be hidden.
What do you have to hide? I mean, this should be an open and transparent system where everybody is assured that the votes are being properly counted and tabulated. So So anyway, all of these things are out there, and we'll probably see some litigation coming from this election.
Right.
Hopefully, prayerfully, President Trump will have a overwhelming victory, and
Mm-hmm.
that the votes will be so massive that there won't be any question. That is my hope and my prayer. But in any event, in the meantime, lawyers like myself and other lawyers throughout all 50 states and the District of Columbia will be uh, on guard, will be waiting, will be monitoring, will be there to answer questions and file petitions if need be in order to intervene to make sure that the elections are properly conducted.
Right. And it should always be that way. It shouldn't be a Republican or a Democrat issue. It should just be
That's
standard.
exactly
Should have a
that's,
standard. Yeah.
that's
And
exactly right.
I know some people are going to be asking, Ed, like, as a citizen, because it makes you anxious. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, well, does my vote even matter? Is this really going to be a fair election? Because it's kind of like, I mean, last time it was a huge issue, but we've seen it in other elections as well, whether, a Democrat president won or a Republican, there's just some question. All right, was there interference? Was there hacking? Was there this and that? So as a citizen, how can we even trust the system? What can we do? I mean, I can call my representative, I can do all those kind of things. But is there anything else, that we can do to give ourselves a peace of mind about the election process, whether it's this year or in 4 years or in 12 years from now?
Well, I think it's getting involved in the process. I think obviously you need to vote, you need to make sure your family, your friends go vote. That's the very first thing you should do. Make sure that your family and friends are registered to vote. I mean,
Mhm.
there are a lot of people that still don't register to vote. I mean, it's
Right?
amazing to me that is true, but I run into people all the time that I've never gotten around to doing that. I'm thinking, what? I can't believe you haven't registered to vote. So,
It's one of our rights that we should
well,
do.
yeah, I know, but some people they're just really kind of like stupid reasons. Well, I don't want to get called for jury duty or something like that. I'm thinking, I mean, really, that is just a pathetic reason not to be registered to vote, that you might be inconvenienced by being called for jury duty. And
Right,
speaking of jury duty, citizens need to show up for jury duty. We need
right.
good people on juries in this country. And so, in any event, there's no excuse for not being registered to vote. Okay, so that's the very first thing. The second thing is, I think that getting involved at the local level. I mean, your county, you have a board of election supervisor, a board of election
Yeah.
commissioners that are there to conduct the elections. Normally, the state law requires that there be a representative of each party, a Democrat, a Republican, independent, libertarian, maybe. But the different parties would be represented, and those people actually meet to make sure that we're prepared. We have the ballots printed up properly, and we have the polling places are all situated, and everything is ready to go for
Right.
election day. Also, poll commissioners, people that actually work in the precinct to assist people in casting their vote. That's very important. And typically we have older people typically do this, and they might get paid a modest sum. I don't know, $200 a day or $300 a day or something like that. It's not a whole lot, and they have to sit there all day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a long day to do that. But we need citizens to do this. This is so important. And my mother is 88 years old, and she's in assisted living home right now. But she used to do this all the time. For years, she was a poll commissioner. She loved doing
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
She likes seeing all the people and seeing
Sure.
the neighbors, everybody that comes to go vote, because you get to chat with all these people. But in any event, younger people need to start doing this. We need to
Mhm.
recruit a whole new generation of people to work at the polls, and that needs to happen in every state in the nation, because a lot of the older generation are dying off. People are getting older, and they're not able to physically do this anymore. And I talked to my local clerk of court here, the clerk in Louisiana, in each parish. Of course, we have parishes and not counties, but it's the
Mhm.
same thing. And the clerks are the ones that supervise the election, and so they're the ones that are responsible for making sure that every precinct has the polling commissioners in place. And he said, look, a lot of these people are getting old, and we need younger people to step up and start doing this. Well, that's something that people can start doing. And then finally, I think people can volunteer to become poll watchers. And, you don't have to stay there all day, but you could maybe stay there 4 or 5 hours and watch people going in and out, watch the process, just to be there as an observer. Those are the kinds of things we need to do. It's all about citizen action. And we can do this at the local level. And, and this happens, think of the thousands and thousands of locations this is happening all over America. And what you're doing in Iowa, we're doing the same thing in Louisiana. And, we all have to work together to make sure that we have free, fair, and transparent elections in all of our states and our local communities. And hey, that's something we can do, and we need to be doing it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because if we don't have free, fair elections, I mean, can you address like what's going to happen if we don't have free and fair elections?
Well, first of all, I mean, we are a Republican form of government. We're not a pure democracy in the sense that we are a representative democracy. In other words, the people don't vote on every issue. We elect representatives who represent us in our state legislature, in our local governments, our towns, municipalities, counties, and then of course in Congress. So we elect our representatives, and our representatives represent us in making the decisions to pass laws, to pass regulations, to do all the things that need to be done to run government at the local, state, and federal level. Right. So if we don't have elections that we can trust are honest and fair, well, then people lose all trust in their local officials and all trust in their institutions. And that's a terrible thing. I mean, we already live in a day and age where we've seen the weaponization of the justice system with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Just shameful weaponization, going after citizens because of the fact that they're Republicans or conservatives or Christians. I mean, the people that have been prosecuted for praying in front of abortion clinics or protesting in front of abortion clinics. I mean, there are people going to jail for doing that under the FACE Act, which, is this federal access to abortion clinic act. And, and so, there's some elderly women and other young women that have been prosecuted and convicted and are going to prison because they were outside of an abortion clinic trying to counsel somebody that was going in to having an abortion. So that just shouldn't be happening in our country.
Right. Can I ask you a legal question on that?
Sure.
So what's the difference between somebody standing outside an abortion clinic or silently protesting? What's the difference between that and somebody who's throwing rocks through windows or setting fire to something as a protest? Why is there a dichotomy there? Why is there, I don't even know the word for it. There's such a discrepancy.
Well,
how can that legally happen is my question.
Well, there's a federal law. There's a federal law that protects the right of access to the abortion clinics, and it hasn't been used very often in our country. Okay. But during the Biden administration, the Justice Department has become weaponized against conservatives, Republicans, Trump supporters, against pro-lifers, against Christians, against people at school board meetings. I mean, we've seen some really terrible and shameful things take place in the last 4 years. And so, I mean, it's a tragic story that in our country, in our lifetime, we have seen these things happen. I mean, look what happened with Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. Both of these men refused to testify before the so-called January 6th committee, and they were issued subpoenas. They did not respond, and they claimed executive privilege. They said, we're not allowed to testify because, we serve the president and he has executive privilege. And that's what their defense was, executive privilege. And so they were held in contempt by the Congress. And then that contempt charge went to the Department of Justice. Well, the Department of Justice had to decide whether to prosecute them or not.
Right.
And in previous administrations, they had never prosecuted anybody. I mean, Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress during the Obama administration. He was not prosecuted. Lois Lerner, the IRS department head, was held in contempt of Congress. She was not prosecuted. So, but Peter Navarro, who worked closely with President Trump, and Steve Bannon, who was one of his top strategists, and the host of the very popular War Room
Right.
streaming show, which is on every day all across America. You're familiar with it. So they prosecuted them, they convicted them, and and then lo and behold, they were both sentenced to jail. Now look, they could have been sentenced to probation. They didn't have to be sentenced to jail. But not only were they prosecuted, they were found guilty in Washington, D.C., which is a very difficult jurisdiction for a conservative Republican Trump supporter to be located in.
Right.
And then they were sentenced to jail time. And they both went to jail for 4 months. And look, I happen to know both Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. They are both men of great integrity, a great intellect, and they're passionate defenders of freedom and liberty in our country, and stalwart supporters of President Trump. And the only reason why, Laurie, that they were convicted and sent to prison is because of who they were and because of what they believed. And that is wrong. Okay, that is discrimination based on their beliefs, and
Right.
that was a prosecution by a weaponized Department of Justice. Well, I think the same can be said for the protesters outside the abortion clinics. The same thing can be said. So I'm just saying what we've seen. There are many other examples we've seen for this weaponization of the Justice Department. And what do I mean when I say weaponization? What does that term mean? That means using the justice system to go after your political opponents, using the justice system to go after people that believe differently than you do, that stand for different principles and values, and attack them just because of who they are and what they believe. That has no place in America. That has no place in our country. Under the freedom of speech, under the First Amendment, the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion, the freedom to petition the government for a redress of grievances, all of these rights are protected under the First Amendment. And so what we've seen happen with the Department of Justice has been shameful, has been tragic. And I hope and pray that when President Trump gets elected, he cleans out the people that are at the top of the Justice Department and puts men and women in place who love the Constitution, who love liberty, and who love the people of this country, and will not use the Justice Department to go after their enemies.
Right. So so he only can serve 4 more years if he's elected, right?
That's
So
correct.
if a more liberal president comes in, can they wipe out everything that's been done?
Well, I don't think so. Look, executive orders are always subject to being overturned by the next president.
Right.
But when President Biden took office, he wiped out all of the immigration or executive orders that President Trump had put in place. So, like all the orders involving the border, remain in Mexico policy, deporting people back, if they just come across the border, sending them right back. All those things changed once President Biden took office. So yes, that can be changed. But hopefully, prayerfully, we will see changes in the administrative state that the people who are running these agencies that can be moved out of office. We can have good people replace them, and we can have a whole new generation of leadership in all of these departments. There's so many great people, young people in this country that love liberty and love freedom and love the Constitution. And if we can find those young people and put them in office, put them in positions of authority, that will be great for our country. And then hopefully we'll have a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate so President Trump can pass the legislation that needs to be passed. There's so much work to be done. There's so many issues out there. But my hope and prayer is that we will see a great, huge election, that President Trump will win magnificent victory, and that with that, we will see a new generation of leaders come into Washington, D.C., and that President Trump will be able to appoint great people, and that he'll be able to get his appointees confirmed by the Senate, and then they will be able to implement the policies that President Trump will propose. So I'm excited about the future. I think that that this is a turning point in our country, and I think people have decided that, you know, we don't like what's happened over the last 4 years. We don't like the 20 million illegal aliens that have been allowed to walk across the border, that unvetted, you know, undocumented. Yeah. We don't know where they live. All these things that have happened. You know, we don't like the censorship that was implemented, you know, during the COVID pandemic, the terrible censorship, the deplatforming that took place all during that time. We don't like the cancel culture that's out there, the people being fired from their jobs in universities and hospitals and different places because of what they believe. You know, we don't like this medical tyranny that we've seen, where during the COVID pandemic, we had these hospital protocols in place where people were forced to take remdesivir, and they were put on ventilators, and thousands of people died because, you know, they couldn't get the treatment they wanted because the government had told them this is what you have to do. I mean, can
you legally help me understand how that happens? Because nobody's ever I haven't heard a good explanation of that. How can the government legally mandate a medical procedure to somebody? And I don't even mean just in COVID. I've worked, you know, in the healthcare field for a long time, and I see even people with say cancer, or their child gets cancer, and they get their child taken away from them if they don't do a specific protocol, a specific, you know, chemotherapy or radiation, and they want to do something different or go to Mexico or do those kind of things. I don't understand how that happens. Can you explain that to me when it comes to medical freedom?
Well, I think what's happened over the years is that the agencies of the federal government that were designed to protect citizens have been captured by the industries that they were designed to monitor and to be a watchdog over.
Right.
I mean, the pharmaceutical industry has exercised enormous influence and power over the health agencies in our country. We've seen that to be true. Look at all the issues with Dr. Fauci and what took place with you know, the FDA and the National Institutes of Health and on and on. All these agencies, Health and Human Services, all these agencies have been tremendously impacted by, you know, corporate capture, if you will. And so, well, what does that mean, corporate capture? Well, essentially that the very industries that they are supposed to regulate, the very industries that they're supposed to be the watchdog for us over, have essentially influenced and taken over those agencies. So what we saw happen in the COVID pandemic was the entrenched bureaucracy, the administrative state, exercised its full power and influence over all of these agencies, and they handed down these regulations. And sadly, unfortunately, the hospitals went along with this. There was a lot of money involved in this, of course.
Because of funding?
Yes, there was a lot of money involved in this. I mean, we know that funding was given to hospitals based on the number of COVID patients they had, and you know, there were all kinds of formulas there, and the remdesivir drug was the drug that was approved for treatment. And so there were other drugs that they would not approve. I mean, you remember all the debates involving hydroxychloroquine, and
I remember those. Yeah.
All of that. Okay, so
get that stuff on the black market. Yeah.
Well, what was that all about? Well, that was the influence of the big pharmacy companies. Big pharma. That's the term that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. uses. Big pharma.
Big pharma.
Okay. The big pharma exercised so much influence and control over these federal health governmental agencies that essentially that's what happened. I mean, the short answer is that. I mean, look, there are other people that have done enormous amounts of research on this. Naomi Wolf has led the way. She's had there were like thousands of researchers, doctors, and lawyers that reviewed all the Pfizer documents. And Naomi Wolf just published a book within the last couple of months entitled "The Pfizer Papers," where you can read what happened with Pfizer and all that went on there with the government in terms of the implementation of the vaccine and how it was distributed and how it was tested and how it was developed and all of that. So I mean, all of this has been documented, so it's out there. And
yeah, it's not conspiracy theory.
Well, I mean, it's not a conspiracy. And this is clearly well documented. Again, the Pfizer papers that Naomi Wolf published is that would be the first place I would go look. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote the book about the real Anthony Fauci, and you read that book. I mean, it's about this thick, and man, it's dense. I mean, there's a lot of material in there. I mean, it's not bedtime reading. I mean, but let me tell you, he lays it out. He's got all the facts in there about Dr. Fauci and everything that he's ever done. And so, there's this amazing collusion between the government health agencies and the big pharmaceutical companies. And so that's what you've got. You've got that, pure and simple. That's the answer. How can these things happen? How can the government mandate that we use a certain drug? How can the government mandate that these mRNA injections, which were, passed off as vaccines? I mean, we know they weren't vaccines, but how can all this happen? Well, it was the power of the federal government, and then not only that, it was the collusion of and participation of all the information platforms. I mean, Facebook, Google, Twitter at that time. I mean, before Elon Musk bought it. I mean, so all of that was going on, and people that had an opposing position, they were deplatformed. I mean, they were taken.
I got shut down. Yeah.
Did you get shut down?
I got shut down. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We had a lawsuit in Louisiana. Our Attorney General, Jeff Landry, he's now the governor, but our Attorney General and the Attorney General of Missouri, Eric Schmidt, he's now the U.S. Senator. They both filed a lawsuit, the Missouri lawsuit, which went to the Supreme Court. Well, actually, it was tried in Monroe, Louisiana. They had a trial in Monroe, Louisiana about the censorship that went on, and how the White House was working with the pharmaceutical companies and these social media companies to control what was on the internet. And they proved it. They proved everything that went on. And so I'm just saying, this is well documented. The censorship by the federal government and the pharmaceutical companies was just unbelievable. And look, in my opinion, it's a clear violation of the First Amendment. And they said, well, it wasn't the government did. Yeah. Well, they were using these other big companies. Look, how many Googles do we have? How many Facebooks do we have? How many huge, social media companies do we have? Well, only a handful. And if the government has influenced them and pressured them, well, it's just as if the government was doing it.
Well, and Facebook even came out and said that they were being pressured not too long ago.
Well, absolutely. Yes, they did. They admitted it. That's exactly right. And we know that was going on with Twitter before Elon Musk bought Twitter. We know that. So, yes. So that's how it all happened.
When I got shut down, because I was just talking about immune stuff, zinc and quercetin and, how to boost your immune system so that you don't get COVID. And then
it went against the narrative.
It went against the narrative. But my last strike was over the Zika virus post that I had like a year and a half, 2 years, whatever, however longer Zika was. But that was my third strike before they ixnayed me. And it was over the Zika virus. They went back that far to find something that they could say was against the narrative or whatever it might be. It was 2 years later or however long it was. I mean, it was a long time. It was utterly ridiculous. And you just had to shake your head because there wasn't anything you could do about it. You could, you could peel, do all those kind of things. And I didn't even have a big following at that time, and I still got shut down. So
Well, that's amazing. Look, it shows you the lengths that they would go to find you out in Iowa and shut you down.
right. Yeah. Seriously. Like,
Amazing.
whatever. Whatever.
Amazing, amazing. Well, look, what? Well, I want to say, I'm proud of the fact that you stood up and told the truth, and you had the courage of your convictions, because that's what we have to have all across our country.
We do.
People have to stand up. Look, speak out. Look, we have the freedom of speech. Use it. Use it. Speak out. Speak out in your neighborhood. Speak out on Facebook. Speak out on Twitter. I mean, let people know where you stand, and advocate for truth and justice and transparency. That's what we should do everywhere.
So we have to have these conversations with people who don't think the same way, because debate is good. Debate is good. And so if you're censoring, one whole side of the debate, you're not having a debate anymore. And then you have a dictatorship, and it never ends good. It never ends good.
Well,
I want to have talks with people who don't agree with me. I want to know why they're thinking what they're thinking, because maybe that'll make sense to me. Maybe I haven't thought of that, and vice versa. I have people that oppose me all the time on Facebook. I mean, not all the time, but every now and then they question, like, why do you believe this? Well, this is why. Well, I don't agree with that. Well, that's fine.
let me tell you something. Censorship never ends well.
Right. Right. Look at the other countries that happens in. Do you really
That's
want
right.
to be in China or Russia? I don't.
Censorship is not compatible with a free society.
Correct.
Okay. And censorship is not compatible with the First Amendment. And, it has been shameful to see the leaders in our country, men and women, who the
Yep.
leaders of our nation in all kinds of areas, business, higher education, government, all over, that have willingly supported censorship and have willingly spoken against the freedom of speech. I never thought I would see that in my country. I
I know.
never thought I would see that in America. I would see people say, well, maybe we need to regulate speech, and people that things that are misinformation shouldn't be on the speech, shouldn't be on the internet. And like, I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? I mean, that is against everything we stand for as
Right.
free citizens in our country.
Yep. 100%. Ed, thank you so much. I love this conversation. I appreciate you taking time to talk to my audience, to meet with me. This has been fantastic.
Hey, look, I've enjoyed it. Look, I'm on Twitter at Ed Tarpley, And look, I practice law here in Louisiana, Alexandria, Louisiana, right in the center of the state. And we filed two amicus briefs in the Supreme Court this year. We filed in the Fisher case early in the year. That was the big January 6th case that we won in June. That was a tremendous victory. And then, of course, this Virginia case that just came down. So the former Feds Group Freedom Foundation, check those guys out. They're on the internet too. A great group out of New Jersey. My friend Brad Geyer is the founder of that group. And, I'll tell you what, let me just say this. I have met so many wonderful people in the health freedom movement. They are just wonderful people all across America. Some of the best people I have ever met. And I really, really respect and admire all the people that are taking the lead in protecting our ability to take care of ourselves and to control the treatment that we receive from the medical profession. So in any event, that is a major, major issue in our country. It's not going to go away. We need to keep standing firm and fight this fight all the way down the line. So look, hats off to you. Thank you for the work that you do. And thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you so much for fighting for our freedoms. I really appreciate you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. God bless each and every one of you. I'll see you in the next episode.